Welcome to It's No Secret, a podcast for Kiwis who want their money questions answered.
Ready, steady, go.
This podcast will answer the money questions you may or may not have on your mind. We'll talk to real Kiwis and share truths about our own financial lives.
Both the successes and the failures. Because the truth is, there is no secret to achieving financial freedom.
Hello and welcome to It's No Secret. I'm Christine.
And I'm Kat.
And today we'll be answering the question of how could you change your investments as you get closer to your goals? Or should you or might you?
So many options.
Yeah. So many words. Many of us probably have some form of goal that we're working towards, whether that's short, medium, or long term. There's often the goal of just general investing for future something,
a
right?
future state of just maybe
of
retirement.
long-term me,
Yep.
But a question that may pop up along the way and as you potentially edge closer to those goals is whether you need to adapt your investments and or savings or just underlying assets to be appropriate for the stage or how close you get to go.
Yeah.
On the other side, you might not even ever have asked this question and be thinking, wow, I actually need to do this thing. So today we want to discuss. I'm actually quite interested to get into this. It's not something we've ever really talked about, has it, on the podcast?
I don't know. I feel like maybe we have over time, but more from the level of like reducing your risk or if you should change your investments.
Yeah.
So, but this is a different way of thinking about a similar-ish topic.
Yeah. So goal first and then, cool.
Exactly.
So first question, Kat, is why would you even consider adapting your underlying assets as you edge closer towards a goal? Why does it even matter?
Great question. So it matters due to the fact that your goal may require like the money. That's probably not a very good way of explaining it. What I'm really trying to explain is like it doesn't matter.
Okay.
If like your goal is to live forever and that's your retirement funding, whereas it does matter if your goal is to fund a holiday that you've booked.
Yeah.
So
it's
there's
like a finite amount of time or a deadline rather.
It's so like intrinsically tied to what the goal is as to how much it matters and therefore what type of action you should take, right? Because some goals you have will almost have like an infinite like timeline, right? Even retirement, your retirement may be that you want to retire, like your goal may be that you want to retire at 60, but you plan to live to 100. So you've still got like, if you're thinking about that as someone that's in their 20s, that's essentially like an infinite goal for you, right? Because you're planning to like have money last for essentially your entire life. That's a very, very different goal to say, having a goal that is I want to work towards a first home deposit or I want to work towards like saving for parental leave or saving for a new car, right? All of those things have varying degrees of known outcomes. And the reason that I say that is because you probably know when you want to buy a car as opposed to like you don't know when you're going to fall pregnant and therefore need to be on parental leave, and you don't necessarily know 100% when you're going to buy your first home. So it's like that sliding scale of it's not necessarily tied to like short, medium and long term. It's more tied to like how known is the outcome of the goal. Yeah. And how much certainty do you need around that outcome is what then drives a potential change. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I was also just thinking about retirement, just kind of get to 60 or the point that you hope to retire and then cash everything out.
No.
Because you want that. You might have a 30-year timeline.
Yeah, you want that money to all keep growing. You don't want to like crystallize the entire capital pool of your money at age 60 and then hope for the best that it lasts for the next 30 years. You actually need that money to kind of keep like working behind the scenes for you and only be drawing down what you need to live on. That's the ideal state, right? Yeah. But then for someone that say is, wanting to buy that new car, they probably have quite a known time frame associated with that. And that's where it comes down to, well, if you then know your time frame is say like short, medium or long term, that's what helps you decide the type of asset class you would use to work towards that goal in the first place. But as you then get towards that known time frame, that's what also then determines like how you need to adjust that.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm like, okay, I think we need a worked example.
Yeah.
I feel like a first home purchase is a good one because in some ways it is a known outcome, but it can also be flexible based on variables that you might be out of your control, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so if we were to think about, let's say I'm buying my first home and that's about 7 to 10 years away or even, and then I decide, okay, I'm going to invest in the S&P 500 because on a fortnightly basis and work towards that. Yes. How long do I mean, this is you probably financial advice, you can't give it, but I'm going to ask the question and then you can interpret.
Yes, S&P 500. Is that what you can say?
More like when I think about the timeline of the 7 years, I'm like, okay, from going from long term to medium term to like short term as you edge closer to that goal, potentially I would start by investing in the S&P 500, get to maybe a medium turn, and then I would look to be like, okay, maybe I need to lower the risk. And then as I edge to like a year, 3 years, whatever, out from that goal, I'm like, okay, cash. Yeah. So
that's kind of like that's essentially the like ideal, recommended kind of scenario that you read about in like financial literacy, right?
Yeah.
Where I guess can lean on is like my experience as a financial advisor is that this is what we would workshop in real time with people, when they come in for a 12-month review, right? Because if you came in and said, hey, I want to buy a house in 7 years, we would assess what your risk tolerance is and the fact that you have a 7-year time horizon that you're working towards. And so therefore probably put you in some type of like growth allocation, predominantly shares, and you would be contributing to that on a regular basis. We then check in with you 12 months later and we would check back in on the fact like, hey, Christine, you said you wanted to buy a house in 7 years. That's now 6 years away. Are you on track to do that? Is that still a high priority goal? Where does that sit? How committed to that original time frame that you told us are you? That's essentially what we're trying to find out. Yeah. Because if you come back in and you're like, hey, actually, tons of stuff happened in my life over the past 12 months. I'm actually now thinking about moving overseas. I'm less concerned about 7 years because I think I'm going to go do these other things for the next 3-4 years, which might then change what that time frame is. Yeah. You can then at that point determine, okay, well, Christine's a little less committed to the original timeframe of 7 years, so we feel like it's probably fine for her to carry on as she currently is, right? Yeah. What could also happen, so let's say then you come back in year 3. Yeah. And we're like, hey, we're now 3 years in, your time horizon is 4 years away. And you're like, yup, guys, news, like some stuff's happened. I've had tons of pay rises. I feel like I'm in a good position to like buy a house. I've met someone. I also want to buy a house with them. They're also coming in with money. I think that this is something that we can do in the next 2 years. Yeah. That's the point at which we would then be like, okay, we should probably think about moving some of this money from a 7-year horizon growth asset allocation to something that is going to give you more certainty around the balance that you will have in 2 years' time. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's the certainty factor, right? Like the higher growth allocation you have to your underlying assets, the more like volatile and like, so variation in ups and downs that asset will have. Therefore, the less certain your outcome will be in a short period of time. Okay. So once you've told us like that goal is now in a much shorter time frame, we need to increase your certainty. And how do we increase your certainty? It's by putting you into more defensive assets that have a lot less volatility and a higher probability of like a known outcome.
Yeah, nice. Love it. Great.
Yeah. So it really depends on like you, right? Yeah, and kind of how far that is. Exactly. Yeah. And so I think like in lieu of obviously having a financial advisor or someone to do that with you, like there's nothing stopping people from doing that themselves. Yeah. If you're say using a DIY investment service like Kernel and you've set up a goal and you've set up your own investment portfolio and you're thinking, okay, well, my original goal is 5 years away, and then you check back in with yourself and do a little stock take a year in, and you just need to ask yourself those questions of like, okay, so this was 5 years, it's now 4 years away. How do we feel about that? Is it still really important to me? Is it still the same amount of money? Is that goal going to cost what I thought it was going to cost a year ago? Yeah. Or do I need to revise that? Is 4 years still kind of on track for when I want to do that thing, because it's really about like when you want to do it, right?
Yeah.
No one's forcing you into buying a house on a 5-year time frame. Like it's about what you want, so you can change that.
Yeah.
But also then I think it's marrying that with, well, how then achievable is it, right? Because that's the other bit that people struggle with, where they then might come in, a year later and be like, okay, I didn't save as much as I thought I would have towards this goal because I decided to do other things over the past 12 months, as happens.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm probably not going to buy that house in 4 years. It's probably going to be more like 6 years.
Yeah.
I would say like there's no fixed moment which would determine that you need to make a change in what your investments are towards a certain goal. It's a moment that I guess you have to be able to recognize, and it's essentially when like something material has happened in terms of you feeling like you're either going to achieve that goal or you're not.
Yeah.
So, that might be, actually, I've decided I don't even want to do that goal. That's
completely different.
It's completely different. Like I thought that was something I wanted to work towards, and now I've entirely changed my mind. Yeah. So should I therefore like reconsider how that money is being invested or saved, and therefore where it's being like deployed to or put to, So that's an option. Another one is like, oh, some stuff's happened in my life that's maybe brought that goal way forward. Now the time frame's a lot shorter. I should probably reconsider how that money's invested or where it's being saved.
What role does like the market moving play? Do you know what I mean?
Well, it doesn't really play any role.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it doesn't play a role as long as you've correctly assessed what your time frame is and therefore what type of like asset class you should be in for that time frame, right? Because the idea behind making a change tied to your time frame is giving yourself that level of certainty. So it shouldn't really make any change. And what I mean by that is like, let's play out the 5-year scenario where you've come back in year 1 and you've got 4 years to go and you want to buy a house in 4 years. And let's say you were in like, if you original time frame of 5 years, we probably wouldn't have you in like high growth. You'd probably be somewhere in like balanced to growth-ish, like
medium,
not 100%. Exactly. So let's say you're in a like 70% allocation towards growth assets. As an example, worked example, people, not financial advice. Let's say you were there and you come back in year 4 and the markets have tanked. So you come back in year 1, the markets have tanked. So you've got 4 years to go. Markets have tanked. You might be panicking. You're probably freaking out.
Where's my money?
But we then need to have the conversation with you of like, Christine, you don't want to buy a house at the end of this year. Your house goal is still 4 years away. And we assessed at the time like your risk profile and, your kind of asset allocation that was appropriate for that time frame, and we landed on this 70% growth allocation. And there, at the time we probably had a conversation about the fact that like best and worst returns over short periods of time, so you have an indication. And we would probably then have the conversation of like, look, this could add 6 to 12 months onto your time frame if you were really stressed about it, but on balance it's probably likely to just ride the course, and that's why we put you in a,
balance,
70, exactly, a balanced or a 70% growth allocation rather than 100% because you're in that 5 year. Whereas if you were on, say, a 10-year time frame and you came back and you're at an 100% growth allocation and then you're sort of 1 year in and you're panicking, I'll be like, Christine, it doesn't matter what happens in 6 months. Matters what happens in 9 years. So let's just
Please
like bigger picture. Chill.
Like leave it to me. I've got it.
We've got it covered. It will be fine. The market will likely rebound in the next 9 years. All good.
You're really selling the validity of a financial advisor, right?
I am.
I'm like, I can see how people panic.
Yes, exactly. And obviously they panic, I think, dependent on like the scale of the goal and the size of the money and all that kind of stuff. And that's valid.
It's money
natural.
It's hard to remove emotions from money inherently, right?
Exactly.
Have you seen any kind of like really best case scenarios and really worst case scenarios historically where, let's say someone decides they're going to put all their money in moonshots a year before they intend on buying a house or something?
I mean, I'm sure people do that.
Yeah.
I'm sure
And then the market goes
there
down.
are people that have done that.
Yeah.
So I can give a personal example because then it's not advice. So when we started Kernel, which was like middle of 2019, and we launched with 3 New Zealand equity funds, we invested all of our like liquid savings at the time in those 3 funds, which was fine because we were kind of planning for it to be. It wasn't really long term. So I did know in the back of my mind that like maybe that wasn't the best decision, but I was kind of like, oh, you know what? I don't really care. Like I just was ignoring all the warning signs in my own head essentially. And then of course, people will remember that in the start of 2020, in the lead into COVID, the markets were kind of declining in between like December of 2019 and Capitulation Monday, which is whatever that random date in like March is, which is essentially the lowest point of the New Zealand market. And over that period of time, so between like that period of time and so December and March, we sort of had an indication that other things were happening in our like personal financial situation. I think, I don't remember the 100% timing, but we were trying to sell our house in Melbourne and we were running into problems because like there were indications that COVID was happening and we were like, this might be problematic.
Yeah.
Like if we can't sell our house, that's not great. And then a few other things were happening and then we were a little bit like, oh God, this COVID thing seems to be like maybe affecting in New Zealand. Like this is a little bit like, and so we decided to sell our shares and I had to sell all of our New Zealand equity holdings at literally the lowest point of the market. Yeah. Like I think the crystallized loss was like 6K.
Oh, that's rough.
But it's like you have no choice.
Yeah.
So
do you need the money or do you not?
I could cry over it for like the last 4 years, which I probably did a little bit on the inside. But it's like, well, you made your bed, now you're lying in it, and also you can't control the world.
The markets,
like this is a very good lesson.
Yeah.
But it is that thing of like, well, the decision that we made to invest in the share markets was made on the basis of like not really knowing what we were doing with that money, which if you've listened to the podcast is probably not the type of like approach that we would advise.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't really know what you want to do with the money and you're still working through that, maybe park it in something that's a little bit more conservative until you've decided.
Yeah.
Because if you then do decide, which we did out of necessity, you may not have any control over the outcome because it's in quite a volatile asset class.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you literally have a chance that it could go up or it could go down and you
have to deal with the consequences.
And can't determine which. So that's, I think, an example of where it's like obviously not worked out.
Yeah.
Where it has worked out, I think there's just people, I mean, to be honest, I feel like it mostly works out of luck because people are like, oh, although actually, no, that's a lie. So we had a customer recently at Kernel who they've been a long time customer. So they're pretty familiar with all the funds and obviously investing in the share market and that kind of stuff. And they've made a few tweaks to their portfolio over time. And about 6 months ago, they liquidated all of their holdings and put them into the cash fund.
Yeah.
And at the time it like flagged in our system because we were like, oh, this is a full withdrawal that like from all these other funds that we weren't expecting. And so we just checked in with the person and they were like, hey, actually, we've just decided that we're going to buy a section and we're now looking and we know that we want to do this and we're going to need all this money. So, you know, they hadn't signed a contract or anything yet, but they obviously knew that this was a goal that they've decided
towards,
they absolutely want to do in the short term, like i.e. next 12 months.
Yeah.
And so they immediately made the change in their portfolio to basically put that into like one of the lowest risk funds available, being the cash fund.
Yeah.
And I saw in our system that as at last week, they made the withdrawal.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. And I could
That's
tell because
super
the
exciting.
notation on the withdrawal was like
how
to
come?
pay for our section.
Oh, that's so nice.
So, you know,
Go
they
them,
had done that in a like time frame that obviously then worked because they made the change when they knew there was a known outcome to like the goal.
Yeah.
And therefore it obviously then, you know, secured kind of what that balance was for them.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. Love that.
Yes.
Go A++.
Yes, A++ behavior.
Yeah.
A++. But I mean, if you flip that behavior, right, it's like, well, let's say they decide to buy a section and then they're like, let's keep our money in the share market on the off chance that we make some more money. Like, that's just gambling.
And
doesn't that just feel a bit like
anxiety.
psychotically stressful?
Yeah.
So it's, you kind of have
true.
to reverse the behavior sometimes to see whether or not what you're doing is the right thing.
Yeah.
And play out the scenario of like, if I didn't take any action, what would
happen?
What would be the potential outcome here? And then you're really quickly like, oh God, that seems
Time
stressful.
to go cash.
Exactly. Like, rein it in.
As you were talking, I was thinking, what if you've in this like flipped it to be not moving away from a goal, but do you know what I mean? So let's say
Changing your mind, or
you buy the house,
Yeah.
and then you've like drained your KiwiSaver, let's say.
Yeah.
Then you're like, hey, what's the next goal?
Retirement.
Yeah. Well, it has to be. For
you got
okay,
one
maybe
option.
I chose the wrong.
Okay.
Well,
you drained your investment account.
Yeah,
to buy a
exactly.
house. Okay.
Because maybe you use that and your KiwiSaver. But then you're kind of not sure. Like, I guess it comes back to, well, what is the goal that you're then working towards? But it's like the resetting to then move forward.
Exactly. It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's just a constant state of you being aware of what you want to do in life and making correct choices, which is part of the whole problem. We're humans and that's really hard. And I think it's like that's why people often err on the side of too much risk or too conservative because
they don't know what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they're rightly so paranoid or stressed about the fact that they're going to make the wrong decision, which again is like natural human behavior.
Yeah.
But I think if it is a good idea to flip the scenario and stress test your logic by like saying, well, what if I did the reverse?
Yeah.
What would the outcome be?
Yeah.
Because that could also be a way to encourage you to perhaps take on more risk in an investment portfolio for a goal, if that's actually what you need to do.
At the appropriate time as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like the retirement one would be a good one.
point,
So let's say you get to 65 and you can access your KiwiSaver, and because there hasn't been fantastic education about KiwiSaver just in general, you have
Especially
the
around
assumption,
retirement.
which is fair, that you're now retired, so you need to kind of secure this money and now's your time to be more conservative because you're retired. Cool. That's your assumption. So let's say you switch from growth to like a conservative where maybe you've only got 20% allocation to shares.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, my baseline assumption here is that I've now secured my pot of retirement money and I can live off that forever and a day.
Yeah.
If you flip that, it's like, well, what's the reverse? I put my money back into its growth portfolio, and that growth portfolio will continue to go up and down in line with the market, which typically happens in like 7 to 9 year cycles.
Yeah.
And
So
the
you're
balance will go up
65 at this point,
and sometimes the balance will go down, but the balance will go up. So that's good. As opposed to maybe staying a bit more stagnant.
Yeah.
And I'll probably be able to just continue to pay for my retirement. And in some years, maybe I won't have as much like capital.
Yeah.
But as long as I'm not forced to sell that capital in that year, then I've just got a paper loss. I've not got a crystallized loss.
Yeah.
And if I'm 65 and I plan to live until I'm like 90, well, could I like play out that risk for the next 30 years? Probably.
It's a couple of cycles
Maybe
in
at least
there.
the next 15.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think when you like go through that kind of stress testing of your own logic, it helps you decide whether or not you're being too conservative, too aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My brain went to the whole thing about selling assets down to also pay for your lifestyle versus like investing in dividend focused funds. But that is a whole separate conversation, and we'll do another podcast on that. But, if you're kind of trying to play out, like if that's maybe one of the reasonings of, but I need cash from those investments, there are potentially other ways you could do that.
Exactly.
Outside of just investing in dividend-based funds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Love it. Cool. Well, I don't have any other questions.
I mean, I'm going to ask you a question, which
Okay.
is just quickly. Have you ever gotten to a goal where you have had to make changes?
Only short term, I think. Mm-hmm. Where, like traveling or something where it's like, I need the money in cash.
Was it previously not in cash?
No. No.
Okay.
I think it's been...
Why was it not in cash?
actually,
if you were
okay,
going
yeah,
on
I
holiday?
have one.
I've got some questions.
Okay, no. Different example.
Okay.
investing in private equity, but it wasn't moving from one asset class to another technically because they were both in growth assets. So that was it remained a long-term goal. I was just moving from one asset class to another. One
selling out of shares and
moving
buying
into
private equity instead.
Yeah. Okay. And so I don't think I've actually ever gone down to cash, but at the moment I'm putting, because I don't know what I'm doing with my life, to the point around financial goals, yes, all the money is going into the cash fund because I'm like,
oh, well, that's okay.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to say no. Oh God, and I was like, Christine, listen to the podcast we just talked about. No. Okay, so you're parking it in a more conservative place.
Yeah, because
to give yourself time.
Yeah, to figure out life.
What if we are having this conversation in 3 years' time and you're still in cash?
I will probably be mad at myself.
Does that weigh on your mind?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
But I also know that there will be goals within the next 3 years that will require cash, i.e. buying a house or something like that. But, shivers. That's making me then be like, I know. I was my KiwiSaver's in high growth.
I can see you digging yourself a hole because I'm like, well, you've now just told me that
I'm just outed.
In the back of your mind, you have potential goals that you think are short-term goals that you're just not maybe acknowledging as short-term goals in a public domain.
I'm crying inside right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so
we can workshop this.
Yeah. Maybe we need another money moment someday.
Hilarious.
This is actually a question because I was thinking it before. I definitely have a lot of fear around moving my KiwiSaver down in like a risk profile, to be balanced or something like that, because it's like I don't, I say, maybe within the next 3 years, but it's not known.
Okay, so I think the question you have to ask yourself is, let's say you got to a moment in the next 3 years, and you had to use your KiwiSaver.
Yeah.
How comfortable are you? What's your KiwiSaver balance currently at?
It's at like 56,000.
Okay, just stand by it.
It's kind of a small house we're going to be buying.
Lovely listener. I'm going to just do some real quick maths. What did you say, 56,000?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just go with yours.
Yeah.
So let's say it's 56,000.
Yeah.
And sometime in the next 3 years, an opportunity comes up and you guys decide to buy a house and the market has gone down and your balance is now 52,000. How do you feel?
That's okay. That's not that much.
Okay.
4,000?
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah. It's gone down 7%, but that's okay. I mean, but that was your instinctive answer. So I feel like that's a good representation.
Okay,
if you're willing to take on the risk that it could potentially go down to like 50K or 52K, and you feel like you can reconcile that
internally.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
That's fine.
That makes me feel better.
Okay, good.
I mean, I say this now, but once I'm in that situation, maybe different feeling. But it's hard to predict that, right?
It is hard to predict that. It is. But I think it's asking yourself that question of like, okay, well, if this happened at this time and my balance had reduced to this, how comfortable am I going to feel with that? Try and sit with that, think about it, and then figure out,
Yeah. Yeah. I think also about the person that you just mentioned before with the buying the land. When you get to be more decisive and you're like, okay, this is the thing that we're committing to, it's the taking the action on the basis that you have that new information rather than stalling and, and actively choosing to then keep it in the higher risk.
Yes. So play out a scenario then.
Yeah.
Okay, we're like 18 months in, you guys are like, I'm going to buy a house. You actually start looking, you're like, we need to get our monies into cash.
Yeah.
And you then do that and your balance is 52. So you've locked in 52.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about the possibility that you could have made back the 4,000?
That I could have, and over the next searching time.
Exactly, over the searching time. Because that is what will eat at you.
Yeah.
I'm
just saying.
No, because it's that fear, that psychology of like missing out on this thing that could have been, and
it's
you're like,
opportunity cost. Totally.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know because my brain went to, okay, well, how long would it take for me to save that back?
True.
And then I'm like, well, could you then just push out the timeline by how long it takes to get that extra 4K or whatever?
Exactly. But then if I push the time frame out, and then what if it goes down?
Yeah.
And then 52 becomes 48.
And then you're like, damn it, I should have just stayed at
home. And then you're crying at home. Always having to console this whole situation.
So long story short, we're not buying a house.
Well, I think the long story short is when the goal has a much more known outcome and that outcome is quite soon, you definitely just need to do the things that are going to give you the most amount of certainty.
Yeah.
Because when you get yourself into a state, which is what I was coming into COVID, like I distinctly remember in I think like end of January being like, I really need to sell these shares. And I was like, they're not in a great position. I'll just wait till next week. Lo and behold, they just went down and down and down and down and down. And then it was like, I had to sell them.
You're like eject.
Yeah. So I should have just done it at the instant moment I knew I needed the money rather than do what we always talk about, which is trying to time the market, because the thing is like it would have been much more easy for me to just reconcile myself to the outcome that was hard to stomach at the time, but would have been a lot easier to stomach than what was the actual outcome.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my God, I have another scenario for you.
Okay.
So I have these moonshot funds and I really want to sell them because I'm fucking, excuse my French, sorry.
She's mad about them.
I'm really sick. They're like down, I think they're down 70%. And I'm back in the same scenario that I was with the Hatch individual shares. And then moving that money to Glow 100. And since I have moved that money, it's gone up like $700. I don't know what that is as a percentage because I need to figure it out.
But you're feeling good about it.
Yeah. And so I'm like, good decision. And then you saying, I should have just done it before it started to go down again. Hi, that's me. Am I like back to moving this? Oh yeah. And then, but then I'm like, I don't have a goal. And so then I'm like,
true. Okay.
Well, I'm just like moving stuff for the sake of moving.
You do have
it.
a goal because it's clearly a long-term investment, that whole portfolio.
Yeah.
So part of me is like, well, Christine, you said it was like a long-term investment. It's still long-term. Why stress about it?
Yeah.
But then you also probably need to revisit our crystallizing your losses.
70% is very hard to get back.
Which is also just like, if you've hit your limit of just being out of love with these investments and you're like, no, you know what, I'm done. I'm sick of it. It's not bringing me any joy logging into my account and looking at it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, whilst 70% as a percentage feels like a lot, and I do want to say it is a lot, like think about how meaningless that amount will be to you in 30 years' time.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
You know, so it's like in the moment it feels like all or nothing
and
a lot of decision making and a lot of just like, oh, God, I made a wrong decision. But far out, we make wrong decisions every day about other stuff and don't beat ourselves up as much as we do with this.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
You know, I'm kind of like, if it's really just bringing you down, you don't need that in your life.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for validating me.
Okay. You're so fun. You're so fun.
Sell the shares.
And in like 10 years' time, it'll be probably still a memory, but like hopefully a more distant memory.
Well, the Hatch shares are still like, they're like, I don't even think about them.
Yeah. But this is like the same as me crystallizing the loss pre-COVID.
Yeah.
I held on to that for so long, mostly because I could see it on my portfolio as a crystallized loss.
Yeah.
And now it's no longer there because all my gains since have made back those crystallized losses.
Nice.
And that brings me some slight joy.
But still says.
But also I kind of am just like, you know what? This is so stupid. The amount of time that this has occupied in my brain is so ridiculous for what will be the overall outcome it will have on our lives.
Yeah.
Like it would have had more impact on our lives had we not sold the shares and not been able to fund what was essentially ended up being like Luke out of work.
Yeah.
Right? That would have been more impactful than us just having $6,000 less than what we could have otherwise had.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Especially when you're in that moment of like, well, we need to pay the mortgage. So
yeah. But it's really hard to see that in the time and you're in it.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, shout out to financial advisors because they're the people that can help you like
take a breath.
Yes. See the bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, thanks for inadvertently being my financial advisor.
I feel like this episode really took a turn.
Yeah. What's new though, really?
I know. So yeah, any final tips on how to basically change your investments or not?
No. I don't think I should be giving any tips. But I would actually say, I think to your point, this is it's really reinforced to me the value and the role that a financial advisor can play, particularly in asking the questions that you just asked me around, but you said you're you're buying a house in 3 years. That's not long term. Why are you in high growth kind of thing? So
or a friend, but I guess this is the whole point of why we also started the podcast, because if you're not able to have a conversation with a financial advisor, but you also don't have people in your like family or friends network that you're able to talk about this in an open way or or, I would say it obviously is helpful if you talk about it to your partner, but it's not helpful in the sense that they're also in the situation with you. You need someone that's like a bit
Objective.
more removed, and so if you don't have someone in your sphere that can do that for you, pay someone to help you because it's a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. Someone who's fee for service and not biased to a product. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Cool. Thanks, Kat, for answering all the questions and keeping me honest. And thanks, listeners, for tuning in. We will hopefully bring you another glorious episode next week.
And Kat, stay more on topic.
Yeah, we promise we'll try. Okay, thanks.
See ya.
Bye.